Angie?
We are.
Jane, I'm gonna need my phone.
Oh.
Quit yelling at your wife. Okay, I think we will call this meeting to order at 7:01. We've got consent agenda items. We have minutes from the June 7th, 2021 school board meeting and general fund vouchers and purchasing card transactions. We request approval of general fund vouchers 175749 through 176075 and 291105 through 291137, and purchasing card transactions dated 4/21/21 through 5/20/21. We have some professional staffing recommendations. We have some co-curricular staffing recommendations, as well as some administrative staffing recommendations. I would request approval of minutes, general fund vouchers and purchasing card transactions, professional staffing recommendations, co-curricular staffing recommendations, and administrative staffing recommendations. Do I have a motion? Arlen? Christine? All right. Then we have some consent agenda items and personnel items, not necessary for vote. And that takes us right into public comments.
Do we vote on the motion?
We need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got to vote on that. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, now, what's that?
Do we need to do a roll call? No, okay.
Only for close.
Just for closed session. Angie, you want to explain public comments and what's going on here this evening?
Give me just one moment. Yes. All right, at this time, if you'd like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting that information, I will transfer you over to speak to the board. Okay.
Angie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Bruce. Yes. And we heard your motion as well for the consent agenda item.
Your vote.
Your vote.
Not your motion, excuse me, your vote. Yes.
I don't think they made it.
Nope, not the motion. Okay. I do not have anyone that has registered through the Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much. And at this point in time, Melissa Foll is going to do not a discussion, I'm sorry, a presentation on early release.
I think on
Request.
district equity update?
Yes,
All right. Right?
yep.
Okay. So Erin Tarnitzer is here with me this evening, and we will be presenting together a district equity work update. The last time the board received an update was in early March, and at that point, we gave a presentation going historically through the work that had been done in the district. It was I wasn't a part of that one, and so it's not self-congratulatory that I'm saying this, but it was a very well-done presentation that involved participation from all of the buildings, and did a nice job sharing what we have done so far in the district in our work with equity. This evening, we'd like to finish up what has been accomplished during the 2021 school year and talk about some of our next steps.
So one of the things we really wanted to share with you are some of the principles that guide our work, and this has evolved over the year. We've done a lot of learning and a lot of collaborating and learned a few key takeaways that are going to guide our work, both guided our work this year and for next year. So the first thing I wanted to highlight was about accepting institutional responsibility for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that was done, which the board has done, by making it a priority and a goal also by embracing opportunities in the sense of, you stated that you want to embrace opportunities for diversity and address challenges of equity. And of course, we had the board-approved inclusive curriculum statement as well as the anti-racist resolution. So those were some ways that you've affirmed that this is a priority, and of course, that's something as a staff that we have also embraced as well and accepted that responsibility.
Which reminds me that we have a copy of what we're looking at that I could give you, which may be helpful.
Thank you very much.
And right as this meeting began, I did email it to all board members. So Bruce, in your inbox, you'll be able to see this either now or later this evening. And there are several links on the document that you'll be able to click when you see the electronic copy in your inbox. We will also post this online tomorrow so that the community has access to it as well. The second guiding principle for our work is to examine the system's impact on families and students. And a big priority for us there is to listen and believe. We must provide multiple ongoing opportunities for our students and families to share their experience and be involved in decision-making, and we must believe what they say, especially when it's hard to hear. We must connect what we learn to guide our strategic planning with ongoing feedback during implementation. And along with that feedback we get from students and families comes our data analysis. We must review our data on an ongoing basis to quantitatively assess the impact of our system on all students, but especially marginalized students in our system.
Our third guiding principle is about staying focused and to be strategic. And with that, it's about moving forward thoughtfully together. I tend to want to move really fast and let's get things done. And what we've learned from the work in consultation with some of our partners that we'll be discussing later is that we really need to build a foundation, common definitions for this work, a shared understanding about our current practices and their impact on our students and families, while also recognizing it's an ongoing process. So we're going to need to start somewhere and prioritize some things, do that well, have clear goals, clear expectations for what will be accomplished, and also support for our staff as we move forward with this work. Also, and we'll be sharing more about some of the systems work that we've been doing, we know that we need to address this work at a variety of levels, from larger school-wide systems and district systems, policies, down to individual students in our work with students. So multifaceted work, but staying focused and being strategic in that work. So the next thing we want to share a little bit is about kind of some focus areas with some updates for you on some things we've done and some next steps. We're not going to read all of this to you. There's a lot of words on here, and this is a synthesized reflection of what we've accomplished this year. I think we have a lot to be proud of. One of the things that we've often said is that this work is so important, and we want to recognize its value. It's also complex work. So when we share these updates, we want to celebrate that, but also acknowledge we have a lot of work to do moving forward. A major priority for us has been communication. So just as Melissa said, we're going to be sharing this out, and publishing this for families to see. We also have done some things. The Equity Snapshot was published on our newly created web site, part of our website, a web page, to highlight this equity work. And that's really important to share out. That's not something we've done very well in the past. So that's new for us to say, oh, we're doing all these things, instead of being reactive and someone asking, well, what are you doing related to a given topic? So in this area and in other important areas, we're doing that. Also, in addition to presenting, of course, to this group, I've also presented to our K-8 parent-teacher organization to highlight some of that work as well for them. We also wanted to just really acknowledge some of the really cool partnerships that have developed over the course of the past couple of years. We've had a relationship with Natural Circles of Support for several years in terms of being involved in the mentoring circles and leadership in the high school, then on to the middle school, and of course with the receipt of the grant, We're in our first year of that, completing our first year, and have 4 more years of that. That's a very important partnership for the district, and one that brings a lot of value to us. The McFarland Equity Project is another partnership. Those are relationships we're continuing to develop, have some connections with the education subgroup, have met with them several times throughout the year, have also had representatives present to the board, and planning to have that occur in the future. So that's an important ongoing collaboration, because that's a group of, community members and parents that can offer wisdom to us. The village board, of course, we have a meeting coming up on June 28th, so looking forward to that. Wow, that's in a week. So looking forward to that connection, because they're doing some amazing work, and want to make sure that we're working together for efficiency and effectiveness. The Dane County Equity Consortium have been a part of that for quite a while, and those monthly meetings are really important. I know there's board meetings that they are working with the board that has occurred, and I think there's a workshop in July to look forward to. A very active member of that group, and bringing together wisdom from around the area. The Center for Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning, I'm going to highlight that, and we'll talk about that quite a bit in a little bit. But that's the group that is the organized group that works with Dr. Shiraki's Holly's work with culturally responsive teaching. And we're going to talk about a book study, but that is a partnership. They're actually going to be working with us, facilitating the book study with us. So that's a new partnership that is developing as we speak. So very exciting.
Where does that come from?
I don't know where they're located. I mean, it's a national group. They're very busy.
It's a national organization
Yeah,
now?
yep. We'll be sharing a little bit about the book study in a bit, but it is sort of a great read, very practical resources for schools, specifically focused on this culturally responsive teaching and learning. The Center for, Wisconsin RTI Center.
I'm
Oh,
so
sorry, Bruce, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that, when you say book studies, I would imagine each school will be doing different books, I would think? Is that the plan?
Actually, what we'll be doing, and Melissa will be talking about this in greater detail later, but to give you a sense is the entire district, K-12, will be participating in this book study. And that book will be kind of the main source, but we'll be doing it throughout the year. So there'll be time for us to learn and then practice together and then revisit, both at a district, mixed groupings of district staff, or staff across the district, and then at a building level too.
Okay, I understand. So it's for the staff?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, got it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The Wisconsin RTI Center is a group that we've always had a relationship with as districts do around the state. What has been different this year is that we had a 5-day, a series of workshops with work done at a district level in between them. So we were one of several districts to participate in this, and it was focused on building culturally responsive systems. So they walked us through a really powerful process of becoming self-aware. Some of the language that you've heard here today is directly from our learning there, and we came up with some ideas about how we might move forward that will guide some of the work that we do in our summer planning this year with Natural Circles of Support and the administrative team. So some really important things, but it's not separate from the work that we do. It's really about coordination that you're going to hear about in a little bit. And of course, the high school, McFarland High School, became the first high school charter member of We Are Many United Against Hate, which is a relationship that we've had. We had representatives come out a few years ago and now have that formal partnership, and are looking to see what that will mean. Largely student-led and student-empowered group there. In addition to those important partnerships, I want to talk a little bit about examining our system's impact on students and families. And we talked about this in our guiding principles a little bit, but we've created an annual data review process that includes looking at our data quarterly and disaggregating it by different populations. We have done sort of equity audits, which is the term that we've used before, but we don't do them on an ongoing basis. It's sort of like, oh yeah, we should look at that. And then we look at it, and we strategize around it. But what we're doing now is being much more intentional, routine, systematic about that data review process. And that's exciting for us. I think it's going to take some time to flesh out all the details of that, and we're going to have to decide what data to look at. But that's something that we're really committed to. We also want to really emphasize our connection with natural circles of support, those mentoring circles that are provided in grades 6 through 12, and looking to expand to the younger grades, really provide a place for students to share their perspectives, and also families of students that are participating to share their perspectives.
Is it practical with the K through 6 kids? Say
It is, and actually, it's often implemented at the elementary level. That's very common, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
I think Bruce had a question?
yes.
Yes, I did. Thank you. That's the question. If you could explain a little bit what you mean by natural circles of support.
I am happy to do so. Natural Circles of Support is an organization that we partner with that comes in and facilitates. At this point, their role has been kind of primarily twofold. One is facilitating the mentoring circles that involve our students, African-American students specifically. And they meet with the students, they provide, empower the student, listen to the students, and provide some reflection on their school experience. And then with students' permission, of course, they share things with us. They also reach out and connect with families of the students that are participating. What we're doing with the grant, of course, is expanding that partnership because the group has provided a lot of consultation for the district through professional learning communities where they provide some guidance. What we're doing with the grant is expanding that to include more strategic parent involvement, larger role in our professional development efforts. We have two major events occurring this summer with Natural Circles of Support as part of the grant. The first is working with our administrative team specifically to understand our current context and to start brainstorming ideas for future goals. The second is working with not just our administrative team, but district equity leaders, staff within the district to help prioritize that. So they're a group that has a lot of expertise, work in several other districts, so they have experience to bring to us.
So there are costs associated with the workshops and the sessions and?
Yes.
That was a question I had, is how are we tracking funds in terms of, our grant is $250,000 a year, is that correct? Is that how it's doled out?
200,000 a year for
200,
5
yeah.
years.
Oh, okay, I was thinking 250 for 4. Okay, so we have a means by which we can associate ongoing costs with, we're just subtracting it from that number as we go along.
Each quarter, we fill a fiscal report out for the university.
Okay,
Yep, we
All
are
right.
the fiscal agent, the district is for that
all right,
grant. and-
thank you.
And that's something that Melissa and I have been coordinating together.
So when you say you're doing this annual data review that includes quarterly data desegregation, what does that actually mean? Like, what are you reviewing?
Yes, thank you. The reason why we talk about it being quarterly is different data becomes available at different times. So some of it is standardized test data.
Okay.
So looking at forward exams, looking at, in the past, we've used MAP. We're looking at possibly some other assessments for that. Also discipline data, attendance data. We're trying to gather as much as we can. Another thing that we would like to add to in terms of gathering feedback is having climate surveys, which is one of the next items I was going to talk about, analyzing that data. What are our students saying about our schools? What are our families saying about that school? So it's about taking time to set aside to, as a group, analyze the impact of that data throughout the
Okay.
year.
Do
Excellent
you
question.
feel like it was more or less difficult during this last school year being what it was, you know, in terms of the pandemic and such, did that make your work more difficult over the course of the last year in this initiative?
Unbelievably so. Yes.
I think I knew the answer.
Yeah, it was very difficult to both have the capacity to give this work the important attention it deserves, and also to connect with people. So those two things made it challenging, which is, you know, I don't want that to be seen as an excuse, because this work is too important for excuses. However, you know, as we've talked about it, we're pretty proud of what we're able to get done despite starting the school year 3 times and
Yep.
all of those things that happened this year, so.
And a lot of, I mean, to reiterate, a lot of this work is relational, and relationships were strained over Zoom. And getting families or students to feel, you know, welcome, build the relationships with them so that they trust us to speak to us was challenging, and it's pieces that we were, I think, able to manage through, but it was much easier in person. I think a lot of our work that's laid out here is setting the stage for next year. So planning that data review cycle process, planning some of the next steps, it's getting it ready, and now next year we'll actually put it into practice.
Fantastic.
Can I add something? So I'll put on the grant hat here. So today, all of the people who received the grant were invited to a webinar that was done on adolescence. It was fabulous, by the way. It was an hour and a half. And all of the grantees were sharing different things about their experience with the pandemic. And a number of, I didn't speak at all, I think I did a little chatting, but a number of the grantees that are in different community organizations talked about how much their students of color thrived during the pandemic because they were not being subjected to a lot of the racist stuff that they were getting in school.
Oh,
So I know it's kind of breaking the stereotype and breaking the assumptions, which is the cultural change that we have to make. But actually, and the friends that I have who have kids of color here have said that they actually had great experiences because they weren't getting some of that, you know, from kids and others. So I don't think it's the assumption and the stereotypes that, you know, all kids of color really.
It's great to hear.
Did horribly. Actually, there was a lot of stories, and once again, they were more from other organizations, but Dane County, about how they did, their children involved did really well. So I'm sorry, I'm talking to you, but I'm talking
No,
generally.
I understand.
But it was a fabulous webinar, and really kind of threw a couple of, and that was their point, is that we're talking about our adolescence right now is all of this, you know, learning loss and all of it, instead of looking at it as an opportunity and what have they gained, and how do we use this, and how do we look at all of the things that they have, they've gained through it. And unfortunately, the word resilient has been used a lot with kids of color, that they're so resilient. We never really think about how resilient our white kids have come out of this as well. So it's changing also the word resilient. So it was just, like I said, it was a really great webinar.
It's fantastic to hear, but I'm surprised.
Yeah, it was.
You know, because you just get beaten to death with this, how virtual doesn't work, you can't be educated this way. It's an abject failure unless you've got parents that are able to be a learning coach 3 to 5 hours a day, you know, with our WEVA folks, and there's got to be parent input, obviously, even just with your regular Zoom sessions and such. So that's great to hear, though. Anytime you hear that the students of color thrive, I think we have to take serious note of that.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in that, in responding to that question of this work was harder to get accomplished given the context. However, our students did very well. And what Christine shared, I've heard as well. You know, I've heard that from our students, that there was a level of comfort in some cases. One was we had, at least K-8 had smaller class sizes for much of the year, which helped people feel more comfortable, but also there was less fear of comments or feeling isolated than there was in a typical school year. So while that's good thing in a sense. It sort of says.
Makes me a little
yeah,
sad,
we have a
too.
lot of work to do.
You know, that they thrive because they're not together
Yeah.
with their classmates, as opposed to everything we've heard throughout this last 18 months is that they thrive when they are together.
And in the school environment.
Correct.
It's not, it's
Yeah,
both.
correct.
It's both. It's not just classmates. It's
Yeah.
also, and once again, these are stories from other people.
Yep.
I don't know the personal stories, nor would I share them here about our students in particular, but it was just a really, very interesting take on this right now. So.
Important. The last thing I was just going to mention before turning it over to Melissa, who's going to talk about the last three topics, is just coordination. This is something that we have struggled with as a district in terms of, we've done a lot of great work, but not in a real organized and efficient way. A lot of great work, but largely at the building level. And so one of the things, as you know, that we have done to help with that is to create some district equity positions to help get us started and coordinate this work at least for the next couple of years, and then we'll reevaluate. Of course, we have an equity coordinator, administrator, that would be Ann Nichols, and then we have K-5 and a 612 teacher equity leaders to help coordinate some of this work. And it's really to make sure that we stay on focus and we stay collaborative and efficient. We also have created building level equity teams. We want to make, some representatives into a district equity team. That's pretty important. And then I mentioned earlier that coordination with natural circles of support and some really important deep thinking and hard work that we're going to be doing together over the summer. Starting in just a few weeks, we'll be meeting with the administrative team and then meeting in August again with district staff representatives. We also, a part of that coordination was, what are we talking about with educational equity and culturally responsive practices? So we've provided common definitions of those things because you'll hear them used in a lot of different ways. And if we're not all speaking in the same language, it's hard to coordinate our work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa to talk about the next topics.
Thank you, Erin. Some policy updates, which you'll all be familiar with, but just to put into one place. Our family handbooks were updated this spring to have a response to hate speech and incidences of hate and bias. That is now in the handbooks for next year, but our next steps will be implementing those policies and as well as gathering feedback from students and families on our handbooks. Are they student-friendly? Are they understandable by students? Or are they kind of unmanageable large documents that aren't as useful as they could be? So those are some of our next steps there. There are a few policies in early April that the board approved. 2210 has to do with curriculum development to include more student voice, which I'll talk about a little bit later on the sheet. And then policy 2105.01 was adopting the district resolution in support of diversity and equity formally into policy. So that resolution from about a year ago is
That
now.
wasn't the case up till now?
It was a board resolution that was passed, and so
Oh.
now it has a policy
Okay.
number and is in our policy
right.
handbook. Yeah. Staff professional development. This whole sheet, but I would say particularly this area, is very much a snapshot. So I don't want anyone to think that this is all that we've done, but it's just a few pieces that we wanted to highlight. One being a district-wide book study on how to be an anti-racist, which 80 staff were able to participate in. That is a very large teacher study group. Most of our groups are 6, maybe 12 or 10 or so teachers. So to have a group of 80 staff who are interested in participating was one that we felt was very much worth highlighting. We've identified and conducted professional development throughout the year. Our main focus this year was on the area of identity development and understanding ourselves as we work to understand others. One phrase that one of our teachers shared at a recent meeting was, we have to do the me work before we can do the we work. And I really appreciated understanding yourself, your own culture, your own, place in society and understanding that
That's
well
interesting.
before you're able to understand others and incorporate that as well. So that was a main focus. This is another place where the COVID-19 pandemic actually gave us a new perspective and a bit of an advantage. With some of our professional development, because it was done virtually, more of our support staff were able to participate. Sometimes those meetings happen while they have responsibilities for bus loop or pickup. When we didn't have bus loop and pickup, their schedules allowed them to participate with us, which was very nice, and we hope that we're able to continue that. Also, our professional development days, since those were conducted via Zoom, support staff could log in. You know, they clocked in and clocked out, and we paid them for their participation, but they were able to participate in book studies or conversations this year.
Did that happen?
Yes.
They did participate
Yes.
in good numbers?
Yes. I would say I think it happened at several buildings, and so I don't want to leave anyone out. But the instance that sticks in my mind is Wabisa did a school-wide book study, and many of the support staff members participated in the book study and then came to the virtual Zoom discussions.
It's fantastic.
Yep. The piece that we're excited about that Aaron touched on recently, and I have gifts for you all before you leave, but this is the book study. This is the book that we will be reading this year, and Bruce will have yours available at Angie's desk. It is culturally and linguistically, ooh, that's a mouthful, culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning by Dr. Shiraki Holly. And this is a book that a few other districts in the area have done as district-wide book studies. We evaluated and thought about a few different choice texts, and there are lots of great ones to choose from, but this is one that we heard from other districts really laid a good foundation. And they said that after reading this book, some of the other books that they read made more sense. And so in terms of, not everyone in the district is certainly starting at square one, but in terms of having a full, inviting everyone to the table and inviting everyone to be a part of the learning, this was a resource that was recommended by other districts. And we have a group of about 26 staff who are doing a book study this summer. And then those staff will be teacher leaders next school year as we go through the book study with the full group, so that when we have breakout discussions, we have 26 teacher leaders who are getting professional development directly from the authors and the institute, so that they're feeling prepared to lead those discussions with their peers throughout the school year. Much of the work that we've done in the area of equity has been site-specific. You know, I mentioned a book study at Wabisa. There's been great work that's done at each of our buildings. We're excited to move forward together and to have an opportunity to do some learning as a K-12 group for next school year.
That makes great sense.
Yeah, we are looking forward to it. A lot of kudos goes to Ann Nichols for her coordination and getting the book study ready this summer, as well as Erin Fisher and Ann Weiland, who are our teacher leaders for equity, who have done a large amount of work vetting the resources and planning and organizing this book study. We'll close out before we reopen it up for questions, talking about some curriculum updates. Our social studies curriculum review cycle included a student survey where students were able to give us feedback. That survey was developed with input from students. We wrote a draft, then we showed it to students and said, do these questions make sense? What feedback would you have from us? Some of that feedback included we had planned to survey 612 students, and our middle school students said, I don't understand this survey doesn't make sense, I don't feel like I have the feedback to give, and so we decided only to give the survey to 912 students. Now, in a future year, when we're in person and more in a different sort of educational situation, we might reopen the idea of surveying 612, or we might always keep that with a high school opportunity to feedback. But that was one piece of information we got just on the survey itself. From the survey, the social studies curriculum review team, which is actually all of our 612 social studies teachers, were able to review what the students had written to us, look for themes in that survey, and then use those themes to guide our work going forward as we're working on making some curricular changes to our social studies programming over the next 2 years.
Now, involving the students to the degree that you're involving them, that's an exception to the rule, generally speaking, isn't it?
It is, and it's brand new, and it's a result of that policy 2210 that the board passed this last year and the resolution from last summer. That will be a part of our curriculum review cycle continuously going forward. So English language arts is up next. We'll have a survey for students to give feedback on their English language arts experience next year. Some of the questions, did you feel represented in your curriculum? Did you feel like you had opportunities to learn about the experiences of others? And it really tied back to that statement of inclusive curriculum that the board passed 4 or 5 years ago that said we want to provide opportunities for people to see themselves and others fairly and accurately represented in our curriculum. Some students, said yes, and some students said, I really don't see, this aspect of my identity represented, or I don't learn enough about this. And those were pieces that we were able to take, and really a piece that students pinpointed in their social studies reflections was about being critical thinkers and having opportunities for choice. And those were two of our biggest pieces to take away, where we thought, we think we're doing a pretty good job, but if students aren't feeling that impact themselves, it's something that we need to be more intentional about and give them more opportunities.
It seems, I've actually been approached around town that world history curriculums and social studies curriculums have somehow turned into a very controversial topic nowadays, with certain media outlets and such are putting it out there that we're teaching inaccurate history, because we're talking about changing the current history curriculums to include, be more inclusive of the struggles of, the people of color and things like that. They've made it into controversy. I've had people approach me and pick and save, ask, what the heck are you doing to world history? How can world history be different now than it was 5 years ago? Well, maybe if you look at world history, it doesn't really include everything. So those are the changes that they're advocating to make.
I think part of our work that, with the social studies curriculum review, is we have been very intentional about looking at the Wisconsin state standards and seeing what is reflected in those Wisconsin state standards that were adopted only about 3 or 4 years ago at this point. But those Wisconsin state standards call us to do the things that we're doing and to be inclusive, to provide opportunities for students to see themselves and others fairly and accurately represented. There is a whole strand of the social studies standards around inquiry that also call for civic engagement. Our state standards are asking us to prepare students to be involved in their communities and to take action in their communities. And that was a piece that was in the survey, asking students, do you feel like you've had those opportunities? And we've had questions as administrators of, why did you ask that question? And it's, well, here it is in the standards. The standards are asking us to prepare students to do this. So we're trying to give them opportunities in structured ways to be active in their communities and to make a change. And I would say for world history, you're exactly right that the world is a very big place. And so the world history that I was taught or that you were taught, did it really encompass the world?
Right.
Or not? And so are there changes that are being made now to include more of the world and more experiences of others? And I think all of these are areas, as we talk about, social studies was an area in that resolution from last summer that was mentioned in terms of critical thinking. And it's just the one that happens to be up in the review cycle. It wasn't put out of order. It's just our cycle is built after the new state standards are released. So social studies is where it's at in the cycle. I think our social studies teachers do a phenomenal job. And they're very reflective about their practice normally. And even prior to the board resolution and prior to some of this national attention or more focus, our teachers had been making some of these changes already. We're just now continuing the work, being more reflective, and having, the student impact or the student input helps us continue that work. Our curriculum process frequently references the inclusive curriculum statement and asking teachers in all subject areas to think about ways that they can include opportunities for students to see themselves as scientists, to see themselves as mathematicians, but also to see others' contributions in those areas as well. We have worked to diversify our literature choices and make sure that students are seeing novels and books that have themselves and others represented. Some of our next steps include continuing to look at our second step curriculum, which is our, I would say, social emotional curriculum for the district, to make sure that it has specific racial anti-bias, microaggression, and implicit bias education as directed by the resolution the board passed last year. That second step curriculum only goes for grades K through 8, So we'll also need to make sure that we have room at the high school to include those areas of focus that are called out in the resolution, and they're included in the high school resolution as well. There was also in that resolution a reference to diversity days. So we need to make sure we have clarity from students on what that would look like or what they were hoping for in that resolution, and to talk to the board about that as well, and then develop plans for implementation in this upcoming year. That was one of the pieces with COVID that we were not able to do this school year, but we do have plans to include going forward.
That will be really interesting to see what that's going to look like.
I think it'll be good. I mean, it's always great when students are able to share
Right.
themselves, and we can learn from each other quite a bit. Are there any questions or comments for us on any of this information?
It relates to what you were saying, Craig, and the comments that people are making. And, you know, having taught in the district as long as I did, world history changed a lot. When I first came, we did area studies instead of world history. And I think we as the staff, when I was teaching, looked at it much more as this was not world history. It was really Western civilization, at least the second half of the class. And there's always been changes. I mean, you know, how do you study the history of the world? What aspect do you study? What do you emphasize? What do you leave out? And I really applaud. I've heard enough from some of the things that the social studies team is doing that I'm really proud of some of the changes that they've made. And I was very proud of what we did, but I think in some ways I was kind of horrified as I look back at what I left out. In fact, I guess that's part of life, is you always have these regrets. But you need to tell these people it has always been changing. It's changed dramatically since when I first came here in 1976. So anyway, I think we're doing a good job. And I'm so glad that you're going to try to this inclusivity. The best, I felt that some of the best years as a teacher I had was when I was able to really spend time, and this is something I keep talking about, teachers need time to really try to integrate this into all the different the fields. English in particular, there are so many wonderful books, and I want to really just praise Sheila Fay. She got started with this, and at the end of my teaching career, she was just always bringing up books, and we had silent reading time, and we tried to weave books. A lot of them were about diversity and people of color, and we tried to get the kids to read those, and we discussed them, we talked about them, but again, we tried to dovetail that into the English in particular, but the other mathematics and also science as well. I think there's so much to be done, but it does require time, and we got to give the staff a lot of time to do this.
I would agree, and it seems to me that one of the reasons that you get pushback when you try to change these curriculums is that people get comfortable, you know, with the current way of teaching, way of learning, what you're teaching, what you're learning. And I think some of the things that we're trying to do in regards to inclusivity and diversity makes some people a little less comfortable, maybe, you know, with what's being taught to their kids. And I think that maybe is a reason for pushback when there really isn't a call for it. But it is
Well,
out
change
there.
is always going to make people feel, it gets people out of their comfort zone, but change is good, so.
I think it's an ethical imperative for us to teach all kids. I don't know why I keep looking at you. I think it's an ethical imperative. It's
I
not
agree,
directed
I
towards
agree.
you, sorry. No, but all kids, if we knew there was a portion of science or math that we were leaving out, isn't there a problem with that? We are aware now that we've been leaving out things. So for all kids, this isn't necessarily just about, I mean, you know where I stand, want kids of color to be successful, but this is also for our white kids to
Sure.
be successful, to go to college, to go in the military, to go, you know, into the workforce. If they're not able to understand and appreciate difference, they're not going to do well no matter what they choose to do after school. So I think it's, for us, it's an imperative to
Absolutely.
open eyes and give different perspectives. That's, our role is in education, I guess, so, and it's a state mandate is,
I couldn't agree more.
besides,
Yeah.
I'm not sorry, I keep talking.
I think something I would just add to that, in those conversations, you know, when we run across people questioning, my concern is, do you know what's being taught? And we have a responsibility to be transparent with people, but well, this is what we teach. And then we can have a conversation based on what we actually teach. I think sometimes it's rumor, or it's, you know, you see something happening in another state and you think, well, that's what we're doing, and making assumptions. And I think as a district, I'm not necessarily being critical of people in the sense that if that's all the information they have,
Right.
it's our responsibility to say, this is what we teach. This is what we're teaching and why we teach it that way, and being really open, transparent, getting feedback and being open to those conversations. Because, you know, I think if you talk about, well, we've made this change in our curriculum, we're now talking about this, people go, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? Of course, you know, you should be talking about that. You should talk about what happened in Tulsa. We didn't used to talk about that, so you should talk about that. That's relevant to the world today. So I think, you know, that part is letting other media outlets or other areas and what's happening in other states sort of drive the narrative, and not being true to what we're actually doing, which I think people in general, you know, feel comfortable with. Not everybody.
I think the example you just gave is perfect. That, you know, I ashamedly so didn't know much about that, you know, until it became a thing. And I think it's terrible that a very large percentage of our schools weren't teaching or mentioning that at all. You know, and that's a major, significant event in history. And how that has been kept out of the history books is kind of astonishing, actually. But that's a great example you raise.
It's very political, Greg. I'm going to tell you. The state of California and state of Texas, particularly Texas, played a significant role in what was included and not included in textbooks.
And you would know. Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
No, thank you so much for the effort.
Boy,
It's really
if
helpful
not-
to know where the whole district is at, but where all of these little pieces come together, and thank you for the presentation.
Keep up the great work, but make sure that you're letting the community and the parents know. I'm just afraid that we got a lot of activity going on that folks don't know about out there in the community. And until, like you said, communication is everything. And I think we'd all be on board, but we have to let them know what's going on. That's important.
And we're excited too about having a parent input group reconstituted. And I think that's going to help us with that communication, because if there are more people in the community who are at the table, they can help share the word, you know, at soccer games or swim lessons or wherever it might
Absolutely.
be.
How do you choose that parent group?
That is some of our next work.
I think it needs to be a diverse group of people to get the word out.
And you may have to go out and recruit. You know,
Yes.
a lot of people aren't necessarily doers
Yep.
so much, and I think that's a fantastic strategy. But like Kate said, I think you have to really be aware of who the members of these groups are.
And when the group existed previously, it was primarily focused at the high school. And so we also want to make sure we're having parents who have students all throughout our school system as a part of it too, which could also help with longevity. You know, if we get some parents of young students as a part of the group, hopefully they stay with the group for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then as, you know, other parents graduate with their children, there's other experienced people ready to, you know, keep things going for us.
And I would say, to add to that, I don't want to minimize the importance of that group, but want to make sure that we also provide multiple opportunities for people to be involved, that being at a meeting isn't always what works for people's involvement, and getting to hear different voices will be important, but we certainly don't want to have a group, that's called the Parent Equity Council that's not very diverse or representative of our student population and our families.
Well said.
So that's important, Kate, thank you.
I agree. Bruce, do you have anything else?
No, I'm really happy, and I really would like to see it go beyond just the high school. So I'm very impressed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Aaron, Melissa,
All right, should I move on to the district administration report?
you may as well.
It will be shorter. School status report and reminders. There are no big updates to share this evening. We are excited to have MRAP activities and swimming lessons start today, and things seem to be going very well. Haven't had large concerns or questions about our updated COVID policies and masking requirements over the summer, so things continue to go well. You will likely hear from us in August as we are looking forward to the start of the next school year on what policies and things will be in place as far as a COVID response for next school year. But we will maybe have a few more public health orders by then, and obviously updated guidance from all of our guidance groups.
I'm sure
So
we will.
we will wait until August to make any sort of final decisions for next school year. Future school board meeting dates. We have a meeting next week on Monday, the 28th at 5:30. That is a Village of McFarland and McFarland School Board joint meeting on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and updates. You will likely hear some of the same information from this evening again, but we'll have our added guests from the village board as well. There's only one scheduled board meeting in July, on July 19th. And then we have two in August, August 2nd and August 16th, as we get ready for the school year.
And that
That-
board, that village board, school
I
board
think it's
meeting
going
is
to
a
be,
Zoom.
they've asked for it to be a Zoom meeting.
All right, that is all I have for you for a district administration report.
Any questions or comments, concerns, anyone? If not, we can move on to our action items. The first is action on appointment of our 2021-22 medical advisor. And I think we're gonna table this one for this meeting. The board is gonna get together and have some discussions regarding directions that we're gonna go here. So I think we're gonna table that until the board can get together and speak, and then we'll maybe do that at the July meeting.
I think that's a great idea, Craig, because I've been really interested to watch different districts use different models of medical advisement, especially because of COVID. I mean, COVID brought all sorts of things to the issue,
Yep.
but, so to really think through this, I think is a really great idea.
I think so, too.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Do we need a motion to table that?
Okay.
I would ask for a motion to table this action item until our July meeting.
I make the motion to table the action on appointment of a 2021 to 22 medical advisor.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Bruce? Any questions, further comments? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Moving on, the next action item is action on 2021-22 private transportation contracts. Annually, the school board approves private transportation contracts to those district families who will have children attending private or parochial schools in the school year as defined by state statutes 121.54 2-B4. Board action is requested to approve private transportation contracts as listed in the attached exhibit. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Arlen? Second?
I'll second.
Kate? Any other discussion? Hearing none?
When did this start, actually? That was a question I was.
Every year we've done it, Bruce.
We do this every year. This
Every
is an
year.
annual event.
How long has that been going? That shows how ignorant
For
I
a
am
long
on some of
time.
these issues.
before I was on the board.
Yeah, for a long time.
Okay, okay.
No,
Thank you, sorry. And I interrupted your whole.
no, you're good, you're good.
No, that's what discussion's for. It's fine, Bruce.
Anything else? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Craig, before we do, is there going to be any follow-up at all on the McFarland Federation of Teachers proposal for early release?
Yes.
Is there-
Yes.
And since it's not on the agenda, that might be something that we can handle outside of the board meeting this evening. But yes, there will be follow-up.
Okay.
Right.
Because I want to just make a comment. I felt bad that when I was going through and looking at Jeff's note, he had a very small note that if anyone wanted to talk to Craig or would like to include this, contact Craig by 9 o'clock on Friday.
Right.
And I missed that entire sentence, and so forgive me, I apologize. I did talk to Craig on Sunday, and he gave me pretty much the lowdown, but I just think it is something that, I look at teachers as kind of that front line of
And
defense.
Bruce, I
They're the ones-
don't want to interrupt you too much, but the items that aren't on the agenda for this evening, we have to be cautious as a board not to discuss. Because if
Okay.
there were other folks who were interested in attending, they wouldn't have known that it was a topic because it wasn't on our published agenda.
Okay.
We are going to discuss this at a future date as a
Okay.
board.
All right.
Yep. And I did get the opportunity to have conversations with Angie Bazan as well. So we're at a point now where I think the board needs to sit down. We'll figure out a way to do this in the appropriate way and discuss this more in depth. It will not fall through the cracks.
Okay.
Okay? Did I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Bruce, second?
Yep.
I'll second.
Kate? Discussion? Rarely discussion at this point. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, everyone. This is a short meeting.
I've never been in a short meeting.
We are adjourned at, 7:58. Thank you very much, one and all.